friend of mine was in our family room and said to my mom, "Aren't you proud of Colin?" And she said, "Why?" It's like, "Well, he just graduated from college," and all that. And she said, "That's the least we expect." There was always a right way and a wrong way with Mom. She didn't need to tell you what it was. All you had to do was watch her and watch her example. My mom lived a very, very full life, and so today is a celebration of that. My only regret is she was not able to be well longer, that she could spend more time being a granny to my daughter, Fiona. I consider myself the luckiest person in the world because I had two parents who loved each other and they loved us. I know she will always be with us.
Good morning. Thanks for coming. I'm Graham. I'm the oldest son of Carole and Scott, and appreciate the thoughtful and loving words my brother had to add this morning, as well as the ballad sung by my wife, Michelle. You'll see some common themes here this morning about, you hear a lot about Scotland, a lot about teaching, a lot about the impact and influence that my mother had on people's lives, and that's really why we're all here today. Now, let me get this out of the way first. The British sense of humor is a little bit different than the American sense of humor. And I'm not talking about Monty Python or Benny Hill. I'm talking more in the Ricky Gervais sense of the word. It can be cutting and biting and often focused on people, and I think my mother was an advocate of that. A few years ago, we went to my uncle Graham's 70th birthday celebration in Turnberry, Scotland, now a Trump resort. That was all in honor of my uncle, and my aunt, his wife, had put on this big thing, invited people from all over the globe to attend this, and when it finally got to the point where my uncle spoke, it was one of the funniest things I ever heard, but it was about a 30-minute bashing of his wife, who had put all this on for him. But it was funny, and so I think in that there's sort of a sense in Britain, and certainly within that side of our family, that's kind of okay, and that reflects love, or it reflects all good thoughts. It's very often, I think, the American sense of humor is a little bit different and tends to take offense at some of this. So you hear a little bit of the joking about my mom, and because she was a character in her own way, and we make jokes about it, but she would have been the first one to make those same jokes. So, need glasses. One thing I want to add about the Jeopardy is, the Louie Louie, I think that was expected. As soon as I heard that song start to play, I said, she's not going to know that. But I think much more galling to her is the final Jeopardy question. I believe the answer was Mary Queen of Scots, and she got it wrong, which was... So she had two main topics of conversation. That was weather, because everybody in Scotland, all they talk about is the weather, because they have lots of it, and teaching. So it was, as Colin mentioned, it's only fitting to have rain today, and it's reflective of her Scottish upbringing and her fascination with the weather. So as highlighted earlier, she was extremely proud of her Scottish upbringing. She, not just her family, but just the role that a very small country played in the in world events, from John Knox to Adam Smith to Sean Connery. This very small country has sort of this great history of scientific, artistic, literary tradition. Remember that she spent only 25% of her life in Scotland, but that still had such a marked influence on her life. Even when I was grown up and out to sea, I would receive birthday cards that always said "Love, Mummy," and we never called her Mummy, but she called herself Mummy. She would still spell check, Q-U-E. I'm enclosing a check, and you use the flavor and neighbor and all those and spell in the British way. So it never really left her. But she was kind of torn between the two cultures. America was her adopted home. She loved it here, and had no intentions of ever returning to Scotland, although she enjoyed returning frequently. So I remember going to Albertsons over by UCI, and the checker said, everybody could tell she had an accent. "Where are you from?" They could tell she was from somewhere. And they usually would guess Ireland. That was kind of the default guess. But the answer was Scotland. Likewise, in Scotland, after a while, her Scottish accent began to kind of wither a bit. And people in Scotland would say, "Where are you from?" So she was kind of in the middle there, in some sort of linguistic purgatory. People know that she's sort of focused on the highbrow, intellectual, academic works of art, literature. There were other sides to her. Reading was a great part of her life. I always have this vision of her on her back patio in Irvine with a sherry or a wine in her hand, reading a book. And she imparted reading on all of her children. It was very important. She was always giving us books. We were all avid readers. So it could be, I think some of her literary background would be Shakespeare, Jane Austen, Emily Bronte, Charles Dickens, Thomas Hardy, Dylan Thomas, Keats, Shelley, Yeats, all the kind of standard people that she taught about in school. But the secret side of her is that she would go down to the University Park Library, check out a stack of Harlequin romances, and tear through them like a hot knife through butter. She would deny having done this. Or, what are you reading there, Mom? Nothing. Nothing. And the way she read it was she would just skip pages as though she was intentionally looking for the salacious parts. But she did read pile of those books, and then likewise with the movies, it was always kind of the gamut of her interest in television movies ran the full spectrum from Masterpiece Theater to whatever's playing at the Port Theater in Corona del Mar, and not much else. So Remains of the Day and period pieces like that were the sort of things she watched. I came home from college and took her out to a movie at South Coast Plaza, and it was when Raiders of the Lost Ark came out, which was totally way out of her wheelhouse, if you will. And she didn't want to go, wasn't interested in going, don't want to go, too lowbrow for me. And during one of the scenes at the end where Harrison Ford's riding on a horse and catching up with the Nazis, and she grabbed my leg, I'm not kidding, she denies this, and yelled, "Come on, Indy!" And so I think it wasn't a pretense, her interest in the academic and intellectual side of stuff, but it was genuine. But there was another side to it. She did have the sort of lowbrow thing. Likewise, I think she kind of came across as sort of proper and prudish in a way that I think that was not the case. She liked to repeat the same stories over and over again. One of them was when she was pregnant with me in Scotland. Her nylons or whatever, because she became so heavy, they broke. In the middle of the Queen Street station, which is the main station in downtown Glasgow. And so she just highlighted how she just kind of walked out of her. You know, in the early 60s, that was could potentially embarrassing thing, but it didn't bother her, and she just kept on ticking. She also, one of the summers we went to Scotland, the sun sets very late there in the summertime, almost 11 o'clock before the sun goes down. So it was after our bedtime. So when they'd send us to bed and it was bright outside, I always found that odd. So we would read. I would read as I went to bed. She gave me Catcher in the Rye. I think I was 11, maybe 12. And I'm reading through it. Oh, there's a very bad word in Catcher in the Rye, and it's at least, you know, it's still a bad word. It's 4 letters, you know it. And I came across it, and I thought, whoa, does she know this is in here? And then it was repeated over and over again, and I thought, okay, yeah, she definitely knows this is in here. But I think the point is, you know, to her that wasn't so important. She wasn't prudish to the point that she wanted to deny us reading great literature. And so it opened my eyes about her as a mother. I'll let Karen Spiros talk a little bit later about the teaching side of things and the way we have it arranged with the kids kind of talking about the mother side. But both Colin and I had her as a teacher. And so I have a little bit insight to that. And understand it was a very, very big part of her life. She talked about it all the time. It was the only topic of conversation at dinner time was teaching, unless there was something about the weather going on. She would bristle at jokes that suggested that she only taught 9 months a year. You know, because teachers get the summer off, and she worked very hard at everything she did. As Colin mentioned, or my dad's note about working around the house and out in the yard, not shy or not afraid of hard work. But she also worked very hard at teaching, and she read books. She did one thing that I can never do. She reread books. I cannot reread books because I know how they end. I don't know why you would read them again. But for her, that was all part of her lesson planning and getting together and understanding nuances and other important aspects of the things that she was preparing to teach. She was selected by students, you know, just outside of just being a sort of well-known, well-respected, and great teacher at University High School in Irvine. She was singled out by students at Stanford University, where I know one of her students was once a big award and was invited to invite the most influential teacher in his life. And my mother was invited up for that. She was brought out to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs by the Air Force to visit the academy so that she, as an influential teacher back here in Southern California, would be able to explain to her students, you know, what the academic standards and life of the academy might be like. She participated in extracurricular academic events such as Academic Decathlon, Kiwanis Bowl, and some other academic competitions. However, she did have, and somebody used this word, so I'll use it, she had a scary reputation as a teacher because she was hard teacher and she was demanding. I told Karen Mayer this last night, I avoided her all the way through high school. I didn't want to take her, not because I was scared of her, she was my mom, but because I didn't want to have my mom for a teacher. Sadly, she was the only teacher for AP English and English Lit for a while, so I couldn't avoid her. And by my senior year, I'd run out of options, and I took her class. And I actually found it was a great class. It was not demanding as I expected. I tend to see working with bosses through my professional career, those that are demanding but are clear about what their expectations are and what they want are the easiest to work for. It's the people who kind of don't know what they want that are harder to work for. And my mom was demanding and knew what she wanted and knew what, as Colin said, what was kind of right and what was not right. And so with those clear guidelines, I did not find her class that difficult. And I think that's been the experience of most people who've had her class. It's more the reputation. So we put out an invite for this funeral on not an invite, but it's sort of an announcement on Facebook just to kind of let students and teachers know that my mother had passed. And I wrote just down some quick thoughts of a select group of students, and I won't use their names because I think these thoughts are reflective of probably anybody who had her class. I loved her English class. Me too, one of the most influential teachers of my life, instilled my love of poetry, contributing to a lifetime of composition and songwriting. Such a profound influence. I asked her to write a medical school recommendation for me to make the point of cultural breadth. I remember she told us on the first day of class that she was Scottish, not Scotch. She said Scotch was whiskey and Scottish was her heritage. For some reason, I never forgot that. She was very feisty and an excellent teacher. I'm sad to hear of her passing, and I want her family to know she was appreciated and remembered by her students. Another, I remember her all the time. Toughest teacher I ever had, but the best. Sorry for your loss. Another, I'm so sorry to hear this. I had her for college prep linguistics and adored her. She was one of those teachers you never ever forget. Another, she was so sorry for your loss. She was definitely, all caps, one of my favorites. I too had her for college prep linguistics. I'm still using things I learned in that class today. I especially loved it when she lamented about grammar mistake pet peeves. Another, my favorite teacher, linguistics, English, mythology, academic decathlon. We filmed the Odyssey at Corona del Mar Beach. Rest in peace, what a wonderful lady. So my dad, Colin, and I went through a bunch of photos to scan for a slideshow we're going to show across the way. And one of them is from that Odyssey play that they did on the beach down here in Corona del Mar. And I didn't know what it was. I remembered something about people wearing togas, and 'cause I was not in high school at the time. And I remember my mom being involved in this, and I put it up, or actually this guy mentioned it. And I put two and two together, and I sent him the photo, and he said, yes, that's what that was. And so that's in the slideshow. Another, your mother was a wonderful person who wholeheartedly gave the world her best. When I remember how the color green emanated from her classroom on St. Patrick's Day. What a good sport. She will always be missed. My mother, being mistaken for Irish, as I highlighted earlier, people would joke, and what a room, it's all green on St. Patrick's Day. And then finally, I appreciated her wit and understanding of how to teach. Sorry for your loss. I regard her as one of the great teachers I had in public education. So she was also a mom. We would spend, when I was a kid, it was roughly every other summer in Scotland, which I did not like. I didn't like it when we were here and we were packing up ready to go. I wanted to play baseball with my friends or go to the beach like all my friends were going to do. But no, we had to go off to a rainy place. But once we were there, we loved it. It was fantastic. And we golfed and we hiked and we, did jigsaw puzzles and stayed out of the rain. Mom came from a sporting family, as her sister highlighted there. Her brother Graham was an amateur football player, soccer player. Her sister Anne was in the qualifying rounds for Wimbledon. Her brother Roy was West of Scotland champion for tennis. And her uncle Jimmy, my grandfather's brother, was an actual professional football player on the Scottish national team. And then there was my mother, who loved to play tennis, but was not a good athlete. Let's be honest. But the important thing is she really instilled the love of sport, participation in sport. It wasn't all about academics. So we played years of baseball, we played years of soccer. Colin and I both ran also in high school. Allison played tennis and softball. And so it was a very important part of her life to make sure we were well-rounded, as she was, I think, growing up. She loved to repeat the same stories over and over again, long before she had Alzheimer's. She had a story about me. I think I might have been 8 or 9. We're getting ready to leave, and supposedly, tribal lore, I was swinging a sock. So I heard about swinging a sock and not getting ready, not moving expeditiously out the door for years to come. She had many brushes with fame. My dad's letter mentioned Jacques Cousteau, who, and she worked there in LA for the US Divers, at which point, I think it's when she first got her love of baseball, being a foreigner. A lot of the salespeople would come by, and this is when the Dodgers had first moved to Los Angeles. They'd give her comped tickets to games when the Dodgers played at the Coliseum, so my mom and dad often took them up on that and went to go see the Dodgers at the Coliseum, and that's something that we still do today as a family. Enjoy going to baseball games and playing baseball. Alex Trebek, certainly, with Jeopardy. She ran into John Wayne here at Fashion Island prior to Christmas. John Wayne lived down on Linda Island, and his son, one of his sons is about my age, and he was buying, that's when hang ten shirts were big, the 2 feet, and he was buying hang ten shirts for his son, and started comparing notes with my mom. What do you think about this one? What do you think about that one? And my mom went there to buy me one hang ten shirt for Christmas. I got 3, because she didn't want to say no to the Duke. So it worked out well for me. Tim Wallach, all-star third baseman for the Montreal Expos and the Los Angeles Dodgers, was one of her students. I ran into him at a ball game a couple of years ago, told him I was Carole Jackson's son. He was very interested in how she was doing. Will Ferrell was also one of her sons, probably one of her students as well, who, from what I understand, remembers her well. Colin talked about some of the trips. So we did go everywhere, and I would say, and this is where I get into my thoughts about my mom kind of being the catalyst for things we did as a family. My dad was not unwitting or unwilling in any of these trips or family events we did, but I think my mom was really the driving force behind them. We went Anza Borrego, Yosemite, Sequoia. We drove up to Washington State one summer. We did an East Coast trip driving up and down in 1976. We did frequent trips down to Mexico, and we went to Scotland roughly every other year. Once I was in the Navy, she took that advantage of that situation to take, when I was stationed overseas, to visit me there. And you really, they say in the Navy, you find out who your friends are by who visits you. You know, if you're in a good location, that doesn't really tell much about who your friends are, but if you're in a less desirable location and people come and visit you, you got some real friends. So when I was a student in Germany, Mom came out and visited, as did Dad. They came and visited me in Korea. Nobody visits you in Korea. They came and they loved Korea. They visited me in Spain. They visited me in England. That's kind of a slam dunk. Later in Japan, they came out with my niece Katie and my sister. And then Hawaii, when my wife Michelle was pregnant with our second child, she was ordered on bed rest for the final 6 weeks of the pregnancy, and Mom came out for a week or two. We did sort of tag team on taking care of Michelle. I couldn't take 6 weeks off work. We did tag team on taking care of Michelle while she was on bed rest until Emma was born. And then she came out to Croatia as well when I was at the embassy there. So it was good for her, but it was great for us having him in all these fantastic places. She loved traveling. We kind of talk about her hard line, but I think it really softened over years, whether even linguistically. I think she kind of softened on some of her grammar rules as she, even before the Alzheimer's set in. But we continued to have good discussions about that. I tend to think when the Alzheimer's, and I'll call it Alzheimer's, I tend to think that she knew what was going on right until the end. I think the Alzheimer's, the primary manifestation of it was an inability to communicate or express emotion. But you could kind of tell she could understand things, even though she wasn't able to talk very much towards the end. And for somebody with her background, her interest in using her mind, that's the most criminal aspect of that disease. She's in our thoughts every day, and her role as a mother and a teacher kind of overlapped when it came to us, because after all mothers are teachers, regardless, not irregardless, of whether they're all teachers regardless of whether they also work professionally as teachers. So just a couple of real quick stories that demonstrate that we think of her every day. My daughter used the word nauseating yesterday. Now, the only time I ever heard the word nauseating is from my mom. And I don't know, Emma, if you picked that up from Granny or not, but that was one of, and I forget what exactly was nauseating, but these sort of things endure. About a month ago, we were opening up some string cheese back home in Hawaii, and there was a trivia question on the cheese wrapper, and the trivia question was whose picture or whose likeness is on the $100 bill? WHO''S. Strong email followed. And we did get a reply from the cheese company. And it won't happen again, Mom. But who would have thought, even a year ago, that the 3 remaining Jacksons would be the men? It's not supposed to be that way. Men are not supposed to live as long as women. And the women in our family were so full of life. Funerals are for as much for the living as they are for the deceased. And a way to reflect on how someone impacted our lives and offer us an opportunity to contemplate on how we live our own lives. No matter the disease or the length of my mom's life, no one will argue that Mom lived a full, productive, and impactful life. There are literally thousands of people who benefit from Caroline Jane Jackson being on planet Earth. Dad, you've done a fantastic job of the last 8 years taking care of Mom. Now it's your turn. You probably received a lot of advice on what you can or should do now. For some people, that might mean a cruise to Antarctica or a trip to Machu Picchu. For you, it may be something else. Just do what makes you happy. The only thing that I'm going to ask you to do is to join Colin, Michelle, Katie, Jack, Owen, Fiona, and me. Yes, me. It's the object of the sentence. In maintaining the family ties that Mom found so important. Allison and Mom really kind of drove the reunions, the get-togethers, the family events, and I think my dad, Colin, and I are probably not as good at that. So I think we've got additional strengths with Michelle, Katie, Owen, Jack, Fiona, and Katie. And so I think together we can keep that glue together that we're missing, that we're going to miss from my mother and from my sister. So Mom, we'll miss you very much. I love you. And I'd like to introduce next my niece, Katie Burney.
I was doing so well, and now I'm a mess, but it's okay. I'm Katie. I am Allison's daughter. That's my brother Jack. You all have to look at him. So the other day, Jack had asked me what granny qualities I possess, and I could easily say that I gained her love for education and for drama and language. And as some of you know, I am at NYU right now getting my certification to be a drama teacher K through 12. And up until last year, I refused to take any Shakespeare classes because I didn't get it. I was like, why do people love him so much? I just don't understand. And then I took this class, and the whole time I was thinking, Granny is saying, I told you so, because as Uncle Graham was saying, Uncle Colin was reading, that she knew every line of Shakespeare, and that's true. So I am now